In a world in which the Eagles need to replace Dallas Goedert, Zach Berman, could Mason Taylor from LSU be the guy?
I think he could, and it's interesting you bring up Dallas Goedert. I saw Mason Taylor in person back in
This is
September.
one of the few prospects we can
Yes,
talk about that you laid eyes on, baby.
and watching him play, the player who came to my mind was Dallas Goedert.
Well, interesting. Let's find out what Fran Duffy thinks about tight end from LSU, Mason Taylor. Give us the scouting report, and then on the other side, we're going to talk about how with the Eagles and how much the Eagles are going to prioritize replacing Dallas Goedert if, in fact, they do need to do so.
All right, let's shift our attention now to LSU tight end Mason Taylor, who has been a 3-year starter for the Bayou Bengals down there with Brian Kelly and LSU. And what I like most about Mason Taylor, he's got outstanding hands. He had 55 catches this past season. It was his career year, a breakout season, his highest volume target season for LSU. We only had one drop. And this guy, he's followed through with that over the course of the pre-draft process. I thought he had a solid week in Mobile down at the Senior Bowl. He had one of the better position workouts of any tight end in Indianapolis at the Combine, and his hands consistently show up. So this is a guy that's going to be really reliable at the catch point. I also really like the fact that he's got a really versatile skill set. A lot of people think of versatility at the tight end position as a guy that can move all around the formation and be that mismatch player. And yeah, that is a form of versatility, but true versatility is the ability to line up and the defense does not know, is this going to be a run play or is this going to be a pass play? Because when you look at Mason Taylor, he's got the ability to chip in as both a blocker and as a pass catcher. Now, we'll get into some of the negatives here and some of the areas of growth, but I do think that versatility down the line, it's projectable versatility right now, but that versatility down the line certainly makes him an attractive option as a 3-down player, a 3-down presence as a starter in the NFL. Now, you gotta love the bloodlines as well. I would be remiss if I did not mention that he is the son of Hall of Fame pass rusher Jason Taylor, longtime pass rusher for the Miami Dolphins. His uncle on the other side is current Hall of Fame linebacker, another former Miami Dolphin, in Zach Thomas. So the bloodlines are great with Mason Taylor. But what do we see in terms of areas of improvement in his game? I mentioned he's got that versatile skill set. I do think he's got to get better in a number of areas, though. Right now, as a blocker, it's solid. He's not all that great right now at the point of attack. I think he would lose most battles against defensive ends one-on-one. And I think he can get out-physicaled as well by some linebackers, some of those downhill presences at that position in the league. And so I do think he's got to get a little bit better, a little bit more forceful on contact. That may have been a conception thing as well, what my expectations were going in. You go in and say, all right, this is the son of Jason Taylor, the nephew of Zach Thomas. He's going to be a bulldog in the run game. He wasn't quite that, Mason Taylor. I do think he can get better in that area of his game. And then I think when you look at him athletically, he's solid. He's not a bad athlete, but he's not a plus athlete. He's not a guy that's going to be that mismatch player that is going to move all around the formation and be a problem for linebackers and safeties on a consistent basis. I do think that he's going to need to be a really well-rounded player in order to be that plus starter at the position. He can get a little bit better as a route runner. There are things that he can improve on there, but this is still a very young player. I mentioned the hands. That's tough to improve on, so I like that he does not have a lot of drops on the resume. But if this is a player, I think, again, if you take the athletic upside out of it, I think he can be a starter in the NFL. I think you just have to gauge what the expectations are in terms of the ceiling. I still see a potential 3-down presence moving into the NFL. Kind of reminds me a little bit of Tyler Higbee. Now, Higbee was a 4th-round pick out of Western Kentucky. When he was coming out, he found a role as a longtime starter playing for Sean McVay and the LA Rams. And so I do think that that's kind of the level of player we're talking about with Mason Taylor. Not a consistent all-pro type presence, but a really rock-solid starter in the NFL with a two-way threat capability. I think that's Mason Taylor.
All right, Zach, let's get into it. Mason Taylor, 6'5", 251, looks good, looks like an all-around caliber tight end. Now, as Fran told us, leaves a little bit to be desired as a blocker, but I'm of the opinion that stuff is about want to, know, for prospects coming in. Like, if he wants to be a good blocker, he can become a fine blocker. One thing that I'm concerned about with Mason Taylor is, like, he was a big part of that passing game.
Yes.
Not very explosive. And I have this list of all the Pro Bowl tight ends over the past decade plus. And Mason Taylor's 10.1 yards per carry is the lowest of any of these guys who played in college, except for Jordan Cameron, who barely played in college. If you're using a 1st or 2nd round pick on a guy to add to this offense, you want him to sort of bring an element to the passing game, give it some upside. I'm not so sure if Mason Taylor does that.
I think it's a stretch in the 1st round, but to me, he'd be a fine 2nd-round pick.
Okay.
And I say that because what he does well, first off, real strong hands. He catches the ball. I think he finds ways to get open. He's crafty in that regard. The size profile, as you mentioned, he's 2 years younger than Dallas Goedert was when the Eagles drafted Dallas Goedert. He's been really productive
I like that.
at LSU. And the reality is that's a system, that's an offense that hasn't really produced a lot of top tight ends, and they've kind of reconfigured what they did to get Mason Taylor the ball. He was productive against top competition. He was productive for 2+ years there, 3 years. I think that he's not the most explosive player. He's not Kyle Pitts. But when you watch him play, I think you see a lot of what you want in a tight end in terms of the reliability in the passing game.
Now, knowing the Eagles as you do, if the Eagles move on from Dallas Goedert before the draft or during draft weekend or June 2nd, whatever it is, how important do you think they view replacing him immediately? Or, would they feel comfortable with a Grant Calcaterra, Kylan Granson, what's the other guy?
Harrison Bryant.
Like, would that be fine for them?
I think they feel more comfortable than I would, if I'm being honest with you. I think they can get by with it. Something you mentioned on a show, on a previous show when we featured this on the PHLY Eagles show, and I thought it was a good point, was that they can view it like the third receiver becomes a bigger role in the passing game, and that tight end is more of a role player. Someone guy blocks. There's games when he gets the ball, but it's not featured the way Goddard was or Zach Ertz was. I'm less enthused about that. I like when your tight end is a bigger role in the offense, and I think Dallas Goedert's one of those guys who you would appreciate him more when he's not there. The Eagles do have a lot of experience with him not on the field, and they've been able to get by. But I think Grant Calcaterra is fine as a number 2. I wouldn't want him to be your top tight end. Harrison Bryant, Granson, neither one really moves the needle for me. I would wonder if the Eagles could look post-draft, but I think if they were to take Mason Taylor in the second round of the draft, the expectation would be that he's a big part of the offense. Probably that he becomes a starting player year one.
And I think there is a case to be made that tight end should be a priority for them, because as you think about, you're paying A.J. Brown and Devontae Smith a lot of money. You're paying Saquon Barkley a lot of money for the next couple of years. You're probably going to give Jalen Hurts a new contract at some point. There's not a lot of places to add to like the firepower on offense at a cheap level. And tight end is that place. Like even if it's Jahan Dotson for 1 year, wide receiver 3 on his rookie contract, we have not seen Jalen Hurts really throw to the third receiver in this offense. It's possible that changes if Dallas Goedert is gone. But I think long term, as you look to sort of flip this roster, that a young, cost-controlled, explosive tight end would make a lot of sense. I don't know if Mason Taylor is that guy. I don't know how they feel about him. I am a little bit curious that the Eagles have not really brought in a bunch of tight ends on pre-draft visits. So maybe they don't think it's as important as we think it is.
Yeah, I actually think you made a good point that this tight end draft class might not be as top tier as it's being made out to be. I think it's the perception of that is because it's at the top. There's some really good players.
Yeah. Two very good players at the top.
Yeah, you don't typically see that in the draft. Sometimes you can wait until round 2 before you see a tight end. So I think that's why it has that reputation. But so I don't think the Eagles are forcing tight ends. I do know they met with tight ends at the combine. There is, so there's some selection there. When you have the formal meetings, you're deciding who you want to get to know. In Mason Taylor's case, the age profile I think really matters, because when you're projecting this, if you're taking a tight end in the second round, you're not thinking, okay, this is just going to be a rotational guy. You're thinking this is going to be a guy who's going to be a starter for you by virtue of being a second round pick. He turns 21 this spring, summer, right? I can't overstate the excitement you would have about the age curve there. That physically he's already appealing, but I think there's room for him to grow at 23, 25. He would end his rookie contract at age 25. Like that to me is real exciting about what he could be.
All right, well, let us know in the comments what you think. Would you want the Eagles to draft Mason Taylor? Let's call it in the second round. Let us know. And for much more draft coverage, check us out on PHLY. And if you want to read more of Fran Duffy's scouting reports on the Eagles' specific targets, check out the Eagles 100 on allphly.com.